Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It, Paint It. In this episode today we are going to be watching Ben make a miniature moist, then let it dry, then make it moist again, then let it fully dry. It'll be coloured and it'll look absolutely awesome, yes. That's a catchy name. We spent enough time looking at the speed paints and like the colours we can produce and really extreme tests for the reactivation issue. In this video, we're going to paint up something properly, something like a real world scenario, paint in anger and actually, use a colour, use a bunch of colours to try and create something quite good and very, very fast, as well as trying out real world reactivation issues, touching up paint, applying varnish, applying decal softener, which was a new thing brought to my attention in the comments. So massive appreciation to anyone who takes the time to leave us comments. So I wanted to paint an Imperial Fist on the channel for ages, grabbing myself a little Space Marina Ruski. This one's armless, obviously. I will attach his weaponry later, but yeah, that's just going to keep it out of the way and make it a little bit easier for me to paint. So one of the reasons I hadn't painted Imperial Fist so far is because the speed paint we had available, the yellow one, was this Zealot yellow, and for me it was just a little bit orange, not as yellow as I would like Imperial Fist to be. So we've got speed paint version 2 now, so see you later, bye. But now we have available this maize yellow, which is a much more out of focus version of the yellow, which is a much brighter, stronger, vibrant, paler, less orangey yellow, and it's going to give us everything we want, or everything I want, from an Imperial Fist. So we are going to take this and slap it on this little fella here and see how he comes out. But on top of that, as I mentioned, we're going to take some real world reactivation issue problems. Decal softener, not used it before, really thins the decals, softens them up and applies them over smooth's not necessarily the word I want, curved, that's the word we're looking for, curved edges, flattens it down and makes them look a lot flatter, more realistic to the miniature. Now, word on the street is this caused issues with the reactivation of Speed Paint 1. We're on 2 now, so let's see what effect this has on Speed Paint 2. And then another one to test out is brush on varnish. This is something a lot of people are familiar with. If you're not too careful with this, it caused reactivation issues. I'll take it for a spin with Speed Paint 2 and see what problems that causes, if any. Hopefully, fingers crossed, absolutely none. Then the last thing to do is I'll make some mistakes on purpose, definitely on purpose, and then I'll just cover those back up with the priming colour, just to create the actual problem I had with Speed Paint 1 that one time when I was painting a Blood Angel and I just could not cover up the red to fix my mistakes. So let's see if we can cover this up and fix my mistakes. It's definitely on purpose. Stop judging me. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's the plan. Let's go and paint something. Alrighty then, so we are at my painting desk now, and we're going to be painting up this Primaris Space Marine, and we're going to do him as an Imperial Fister. To do so, we've started by priming him up in an off-white colour. I've gone for Citadel's Wraithbone, which is a slightly warm white. The reason for choosing this particular primer is it goes on very, very smooth. I think the speed paints look fantastic over the top of it, so that's going to give us a nice base to start from. The first actual speed paint we're going to be applying is Grim Black. We're going to be using this to do all of these sort of soft bits in his armor, so that's sort of his armpits, his knee pits, what the hell do you call that bit, but the backs of his knees, some folds in his sort of back, and his, what's that bit called, the belly. Yeah, his belly armor, that might be a bit black as well. Basically, anyway, you can see sort of this rubber sort of material, and I think that one's been black. I will mention I'm actually using Speed Paint 1 for this Grim Black because I already own it, so why not try and use up that bottle first? We do need to bear that in mind as we go through. This paint can and probably will reactivate. The only time I've had a reactivation issue was actually painting up Space Marines, and it was for this exact bit where you're sort of trying to reach through the armor and you might catch this black on other bits, or get it on the actual armor itself, which then is going to reactivate later, that sort of thing. Now I am also going to use the black for the trim of his armor. I'm going to give him black sort of shoulder pads, so all the edging around that, and I'm going to use speed paint. You don't need to use speed paint for this. I think it would be quite flat, but why not? It's an easy paint to apply. It's a small enough area that's very easy to reach, so just use a small brush and you can just slap on some speed paint. It'll give some sort of effect. It's fairly flat though, isn't it, that it's highlighted and well, I'm not sure it's going to have that many shadows because there are no shadows for it to go, but it'll settle in some areas a bit darker than others. It's going to give some effect of highlighting, probably not a very realistic one, but it's going to be easy, and I'm not going to have to change paint, so I'll take that. I'll also slap some in the back of his vent things just to give a really dark tone in there. I'm not quite sure whether I'll do them silver or black going forward, but I'll start with black anyway and see where we go from that. Then he's got a whole bunch of accessories on him, pouches, a gun holster, lots of pouches actually. This one's got quite a few things. Again, just going to do them all black, keep it simple, not going to push too many colours to this miniature. I think because he's primarily going to be yellow, black's going to look fantastic. I mean, wasps look good, right? Like, you can't argue with them. Pretty mean looking fuckers, so let's go for the same look with this guy. The next bit I am going to paint is the bird skull. Hang on. Aquila. That's the one first try. So we're going to paint that on his chest. And for that, I'm going to try out using Talas Bronze. I'm not necessarily going to keep it this color. I think it was a nice metallic base coat, which is closer to the red that I want it to be. So it's going to give it a sort of shiny look when we're finished. But what I also thought is some people might just like to see this color used in anger in a position where it could technically kind of be correct. So I'm going to paint it on this color first. We can have a little look at it, see how we feel about it. I know already I'm going to paint mine red, but take that in at this point in the video and see if you like that color used on his Aquila. And we are finally on to the main event, guys. I'm going to bust out the Speed Paint 2. Well, everything but Grim Black Speed Paint 2, but I'm going to bust out the Maize Yellow. Been looking forward to this color since I found out Speed Paint version 2 was on its way. And one of the first things I said is we wanted some brighter colors, and I had yellow in mind. Maybe even specifically to paint up one of these Marines. Now, for this part, you're going to want to apply the paint fairly evenly. I think that's quite important here. These Space Marines are hella flat. There's not many recesses. Contrast and speed paints don't have a great position to show off. What they do is paint incredibly fast. So although you're not going to get the huge benefits from the 3 sort of layers of highlighting, midtones and shadows, you are just going to get a really quick, sick paint job. And this is yellow, guys. This is going to apply really easily, really well, and really smoothly. If you apply it evenly, you're going to want to go round and make sure you slurp up any huge pools, especially on the flat areas. It's going to look a little bit weird. Try and get some in the very few gaps you have sort of between the armor, pop out those details a little bit better. But yeah, just take your time, maybe do one piece of armor at a time, one plate of armor at a time. That's really what I did here. Concentrate on one, make sure I got that roughly exactly how I wanted, then moved on to the next piece. It's a little bit slower than I would normally paint with speed paint, but I think it's going to give a much better result. We've seen in the past, I've painted a Blood Angel, I've painted a Dark Angel, I've painted a Salamander, and all of them I did very, very quick. Don't get me wrong, there were a few minutes of paint job, but you got to see a little bit of pooling in places you didn't want, especially on the shoulder pads. That was one of the worst bits. Still worth it, in my opinion. You know, it took no time whatsoever, and this is going to be the same, but I'm going to try in this one and get the best paint job I can with these new speed paints. I don't think there's a lot more to say about that. I'm going to go around and do all of his armor. It's going to take a little bit of time. I'll do the rest off camera. Now we've got a big, bright yellow Space Marine completely done. Whoa. I personally, it's subjective, guys, but I think this is looking absolutely fantastic. Now, I did see a little bit of reactivation where the yellow hit some of the black. It kind of actually worked in my favor. It just darkened down the yellow on the edges, especially on the shoulder pads where it meets the trim of that black. I think I was lucky, not always lucky, but it helped in my favor there. But yeah, definitely seeing the difference between Speed Paint 1 and 2 there, that if you're using the Grim Black from the old set, this is going to happen. It's one of the reasons in the new Mega set they included the black. It's a very popular color, and you can see I'm already using it. Well, anyway, I digress. What are we painting right now, right here? It is a murder scene, and I'm going on top of that Aquila. I'm going to try and make it more red, but I just wanted that base of the bronze one, because you got to see it now, and if you like, that's what it's going to look like if you want to paint a speed paint bronze. It's more of a two-tone speed paint. You don't get, you basically lose the highlight. You kind of get the mid-tone, and you get the recess shadowing, so you get a little bit of pop, a little bit of detail showing through, but you don't quite get the highlight, because the highlight works a lot by leaving the primer showing, doesn't it? And that just will look like white shining through, and it's not going to look very metallic at all, which just looks a little bit odd. So I'm guessing that's why they can only push this as far as getting 2 tones out of it. But I wanted this to look more red, so we're applying Murdercene, which is an awesome colour from the new range. It's one of my favourites, and it's great that I got to use the yellow and the Murdercene straight away. I've basically used Murdercene on like everything I've painted so far. It's one of my favourite of the new colours. Once I've got the Aquila, and don't forget I've got the gun one done as well, I'll just do the seal. I think this is a really nice deep red, almost purpley for the seal. I think it looks quite like wax, so I'll just do that anyway. And once again, just I could go and get a different red, I could, but I'm keeping the palette small, which increases the speed at which you can paint this miniature. I'll grab some old school flaccid boner. Now this one isn't included in the new set yet. It will be updated in the future. There will be a version 2, but this isn't going to matter. I am not going to reactivate this. I'm just going to do one color on it. I'm just going to give it a quick lick of this bone color just on the scrolly part of this scroll. What the hell do you call these things? Purity seal. How am I ever going to remember that? What does that even mean? But yes, let's add some of this to their purity seals. Next up is a broadsword silver, the second metallic we're going to use in this. Another speed paint, so this is going to have that 2-tone alloy look. It's going to have like the mid-range and a little bit of shading in the recesses. I'm going to be applying this to, I'm going to call everything his vents, but he's got these things on the back. I'm going to do those in silver to mix it up. I'm going to catch a little bit inside the other vents, like it's all vents. I'm also going to do a little bit on the back of his legs. I don't know if these are like bolts or not, or whether they should be silver. But when the miniature's finished, I didn't like them, so I just reprimed them and just painted them back in with the maize yellow. Wasn't for me. Let me know what you guys do with them. It looked like a little bit of detail I could pop out and make a little bit more interesting, but ultimately, I think it detracted from how cool the yellow looks. So I just put it back to how it was. And then he's got his gun handle on his belt as well. And then I did a couple of the buttons he's got on his gun holster and a couple of those pouches around his rim. Don't forget that I'm painting the gun off camera, so a lot of that was metallic, so you'll see that at the end. I will glue it on, but essentially that's just using broadsword silver on all the bits that wanted to be silver, and it went on really fast. For his eyes, I didn't do it on camera because they're small and fiddly, and no matter what I show you, it's not going to help very much, but I used a new speed paint. It was Battleship Grey. It's a very slightly off-white grey, and I just got 2 blobs and let them like run into his eyes. I gave him 2 coats, and let's give him a blue tint to his eyes. You can do them any colour you want really, but I thought this suited the miniature well. And then we can get to testing some reactivation issue in a real world. In anger, we get to see if this is an actual problem. So I've painted his kneecaps all in yellow, and I actually wanted to add, oh my lord, what are these called? Yeah, I'm not sure. Squad markings, rank, maybe their specialization or unit type. Whatever it is, I wanted to put something on his knee, mostly just so I could test the reactivation. So I'm taking Army Painter's matte white here. A little bit watered down, not too much. I'm not going to purposely try and reactivate this. I'm going to try and use it in a very realistic way where I need to bring that back to white so I can paint it a different color. I'm going to apply 1 thin coat, and I'm then going to let that dry and check how it looks. And I can tell you it looked absolutely fine. There was no yellow showing through. The paint coat was incredibly thin, so you could sort of see it through, but it wasn't bleeding. It wasn't turning my white yellow. It was just thin. So I just added a second coat and it looked even better. Again, just wasn't a bright enough white, and it wasn't bleeding through. There was no reactivation, which I was surprised. I thought this yellow would bleed a little bit, but I added 2 coats and it looked white. And I actually added a 3rd coat because I wanted it to be bright white, and just for the sake of making this marking look extra awesome. So guys, that did not reactivate in my opinion whatsoever. I was very, very happy with that. That was exactly the time I've noticed the reactivation in the past when I've been painting white on top of speed paint on a Space Marine, particularly adding markings to his kneecap. It's infuriating, and it looks like it's gone. So this is the first time I've used it in anger, and I'm happy with that. Obviously, this is one of 50 colors, so there's quite a few more I'd like to try out, but yellow I thought would be one of the worst, so I'm pretty stoked about seeing that. We're going to finish off the markings. I'm going to take some matte black and I'm just going to paint that on top of the white in two sort of triangular shapes. I don't know what these markings mean, but it looks freaking cool and I wanted to do it. Now after that marking's complete, I want to add some more markings, and that's going to be in the form of the sort of company logo, the chapter, the faction emblem on his left shoulder pad. Now, he's an Imperial Fist, and I happen to have some Imperial Fist decals. I do want to mention, and I've mentioned this in the past, I don't understand how or why this has happened, but these have perished incredibly badly, and they kind of flake and break apart. So some of the work here will not look absolutely amazing, and that is not going to be Speed Paint's fault. It's the bloody decals, and I don't know why they've done this, but I've got black Templars that they just ripped when I tried to apply them. Anyway, we're going to just apply a decal like I normally would, get it kind of wet, slap it on the shoulder of the miniature. Now, I will then let that dry a little bit and see if there's any reactivation. There was not, so the water didn't quite reactivate. Any issue there. Got asked in the comments a couple of videos ago about how this behaves with decal softener, and it's something I hadn't actually heard of, and I've picked some up especially for this video, and especially to try it because it's a good point. Will this cause reactivation? Because you've got to apply this on top of the decal and essentially on top of your speed paint. So I think, to be honest, normally at this point I'd have just gone outside and given this a coat of varnish, just some matte varnish, and that's going to lock that in anyway, so this wouldn't be a problem for me. But I wanted to test it out for the viewer, and I thought it was a good test to do. So I've put his faction decal on his shoulder, and then taking plenty of this decal softener and just fully coating the decal with it. That's going to actually thin the decal, and it brings out the crinkles, the creases. It just creases the creases, and it just lets it sit a little bit flatter to his shoulder, because they're a pain, aren't they? They're round, they're curved. The decal doesn't sit very flat. This allows it to do. You just need to soak it. It's going to soften it up. It's going to stretch it out and thin it down, and it actually makes it sit and look more realistic to his shoulder, like it's actually been painted on. Now, I will note you have to, well, I don't know if you have to, but I put a lot on, and it left it kind of wet for a kind of long time. So it's no surprise to me there was slight reactivation. Somebody else who's tried this might be able to let us know in the comments below how much Speed Paint 1 reactivates. I imagine by the sound of it, it was a huge problem, and it just seeped through. This just made the white look a little bit yellow. Just give it a tint of yellow. You could still tell it was white, but it wasn't bright white anymore. It definitely removed that. So this decal softener, guys, if you use it, is going to cause a slight amount of reactivation. I don't know if that's a problem. I don't know if you want it to look a little bit more like the armor, or if it's supposed to pop out bright white. Personally, I'm going to want it to look bright white. So I'm going to be applying varnish before I add decals going forwards. I think it's sensible. I think it's going to stop any issues. Having said that, I just slapped a little bit of thin white paint back over the white area. It wasn't particularly difficult. Obviously, it's going to slow down your miniature painting, because you've got to be a little bit careful. There's an emblem to carefully paint around, but I popped it back to bright white, no issues whatsoever. So I wasn't entirely sure if I left it 2 hours, so I did a second decal test on his right shoulder, just added another white decal. This was over 12 hours. I left it overnight, so it should be as dry as it needs to be, and once again, very, very, very slight reactivation. And I actually saw it in one of the cracks for the decal. As I mentioned, this is slightly perished decals. It got a little bit of a crack in, and you could see that that's where the bleed was coming through. It wasn't necessarily, had I just been able to get the decal softener bang on the decal without any dodgy perished decals, it might not be an issue. So I'd like to try this again in the future with some decals with no cracks or defects. That could be not helping, could be to my disadvantage, or to, more importantly, the Speed Paint's disadvantage. But essentially, I think, yeah, you've got to leave this decal softener on long enough. It's going to moisten up the paint and potentially show a little bit of bleed. So the next question we were asked is, how does brush on a varnish affect the Speed Paint, if at all, anymore? So I slapped that all over the miniature using big thick slabs of it, just like I would when I apply varnish using a brush. Let's have a look, and I can see no ill effects whatsoever of using brush on varnish. I think it looks absolutely spot on. I've never used it on original Speed Paint. I always use a rattle can, so I can't see how much that would normally bleed, but I think a lot worse than this. And the black, remember, is Speed Paint 1, so it didn't really affect that either. And with that, guys, I went and stuck his arms back on and gave him my standard base, which is covered on the channel if you really like how I do the bases. That's a very easy, quick tutorial. Not a lot to it, a bit of glue and a bit of dry brushing, and Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. But yeah, guys, we're done. And I think this is the best Space Marine I may have ever painted, but subject in it. Like, at the end of the day, I painted a yellow Space Marine, and it looks very yellow, and I think it looks exactly how I imagined it could and should and would, and I'm glad I've waited until this maize yellow has been released. I don't think I'd have got this exact same effect, although now I want to go and try it with Zealot yellow. It might also look awesome. You might get much stronger shadows, which could pop out the yellow even more, but this is a very subtle, very nice, bright yellow. I think it looks great. Guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm very, very happy with this. It was slower than a lot of my speed paint jobs because I was very careful with the flat areas using this yellow. I also faffed with decals for way too long, but I am very happy with this. This is one of the proudest things I've painted in recent history. Let me know, guys, what you think below and what you would like to see next. Is there another colour you would like to see used in anger like these ones were done today? Thank you all ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.